Throughout my entire life, I have been haunted by this one mindset that I am not good enough. It has stopped me expressing how I truly felt to girls, lying about who I am to those closest around me. And I even remember one night at university when we brought a bunch of girls back to our apartment and I pretended to fall asleep because I was too afraid to have myself show up in that intimate environment because I just deep down did not feel like I was good enough. And this mindset is so deadly for guys because it runs against that one trait that everyone throws around of the most desirable thing a man can have, which is confidence. And how can you be a confident man if underpinning all of that, you have this never-ending sensation of, I'm not good enough. But then recently, the funniest thing happened. I was in a video like this and I was about to speak to the fact that I have this not good enough voice that keeps on talking to me. And I realised recently that voice has started to dim and it's not quite as deafening all the time as it used to be. And that's pretty curious because fair enough, it's still there. Like there are still instances that can bring it out of me. Like if I go for a run around my local loop and I'm like 5 minutes slower than usual, there'll be something in there that tells me, you know what, you could do a bit better. But I think anyone that's been there in that crippling state where everywhere they turn, it seems to suggest who they are fundamentally is not good enough and everything reminds them of that. I think they would love the relief of the idea that that voice would kind of tune down. So what I want to do in this video is run through what I managed to reflect back on that I've been doing that have managed to reduce this voice that is allowing me to communicate better, which has made me so much more effective with talking to women and just talking and expressing myself in general. Because I think there are 4 major steps that it takes to take someone from being in this true I'm not good enough mentality to seeing themselves and kind of thinking they're at least not too bad. So the first one I have is changing who you surround yourself with. I think the peak period for me not feeling good about who I was probably at school. I was surrounded by people that I just don't think wanted the best for me and weren't that interested in me having any level of self-esteem. I remember one time that my friends hid like a tampon in my backpack and then pulled it out in front of a bunch of girls to convince them that I was actually a woman. Not really great behaviour from those people that are meant to be closest to you. And this has an impact on us. I'd love to say that your own self-perception of who you are is only down to you, but we're social animals. How other people interact with us, it has an impact on our identity. And if all you're surrounded with are people that kind of treat you badly, you're never going to be able to have a sensation of that you're anything other than not good enough, because that's how everyone treats you. And to be honest, there's some level of like symbiotic nature because we teach other people how to treat us. So if we don't feel good enough, then they end up treating us like that, which makes us compound and feel even worse. Like picking and choosing the right people to surround yourself with, it's no joke. There's a saying that show me your 5 closest friends and I'll show you your future, because that's what it is. That is the impact they have on you. And really reflect, because a trap we can fall into is just because that's all we've ever known, we assume that that's just what friendship is, or like we've always known Dan and Barry, like that's just what it is. These are my friends for life. And no, like I reinvented myself a few different times, and a big part of that was moving cities and having new social groups. So I met people who weren't like that at all, that encouraged the best out of me, and I just kind of blossomed in that. And right now, I think I'm surrounded by some really great people. I live my life half in Bulgaria, half in the UK, and in both sides of that, I have amazing circles of people that only want to build you up. Really look into who are these people around you, because there's no diet is going to save you and make you feel better if everyone around you projects this image that they can treat you however they want. So that's the first one to really dive into. Secondly, start tackling your dragons. So this one's a bit of a shout out to Alex Hormozy, because there's a quote of his that you should outwork your self-doubt, that you will not build self-esteem by shouting words of affirmation in the mirror. All you can do is build a stack of evidence you are who you say you are. And part of that is every single person knows the things that they should be doing. Like, maybe you think your health's not in a great place, you probably should be going to the gym. Or there's that thing at work that you keep putting off, or that conversation you're meant to have with family. And it's like, our internal watcher, our internal mind, there is that part inside you that is watching your behaviour. And every time you hide away from these things you know you need to do, you say that you're not strong enough to tackle them. The dragon is bigger than you. And how will you ever build any confidence and start to feel like you're good enough or anything like that when all you do is hide away from the things that you know you should be doing? Our brain is actually more logical than you'd expect. It's just the fact that, you know, we're intrinsically a bit lazy and a bit scared to do the things that are difficult. We want to postpone that. But all that does is eat away at our own self-esteem, because the dragon doesn't stay the same size. It's like, if you have forgotten to pay a small tax bill 1 year, if you then don't go back to that and leave it for like 5 years in the shadows, it doesn't stay this small little dragon that you could have dealt with at the time. Now it's 5 years deeper. They're coming after your ass. And this is what happens with conversations you should have had with friends. This is what happens with every dragon you hide away. And then what that does is compound on ourselves, because we're saying that we're not good enough. We're not strong enough to take them on. We're not strong enough to have that conversation we know we should have been having. I think in my life, one of the things that I did recently was, I call it deliberate action. I knew some things were wrong. One of them was the fact that I just needed to commit to putting more YouTube videos out and being able to actually really get good at the ability to communicate, because I wasn't doing that. We weren't putting out, check back like a year ago, we were not putting out that many frequent videos, and things weren't coming together for me. And I knew what I needed to do was just be brave enough to commit to doing like a video every couple of days. And I've now done that for like 3 and a bit months now of just consistent uploads. And that was difficult. You have no idea the amount of times where I was just like, I feel awful. I really do not want to be in a position where I've got to speak for like 15 minutes solid about complex topics. But I dragged myself there and I did it. And over the repetitions of this, these dragons that I knew I needed to deal with, I've built up a level of confidence, and it's something to buttress against, because we're always going to have those dark thoughts. There is no world that you create where it's not freaking midnight and some thought comes into your head questioning, oh, did I say the wrong thing there? Oh, am I doing the right thing? But then if you've been spending your time correctly fighting the dragons, it's like, if I have a question mark about my legitimacy to be able to do this and to create these videos and offer out what I have to the world, well, when those thoughts crop in, I'm like, well, you did manage to commit to do this. And like, that's been difficult. And you did actually do that, and you've done it pretty well. So maybe this argument isn't valid. But if we don't have the evidence to be able to buttress against this argument, then all we do is get buried by it. I can imagine a different version of me that has that thought at midnight, and he just crumbles because he didn't have the evidence to back him up, and then gets caught in the vicious cycle, which buries his self-esteem, which then makes him less likely to get the evidence. It's really bad. So there will be dragons in your own life that you're not facing, and it sucks, but think of it like a video game. When you go and take on the big boss monster, you don't get the XP, you don't get the experience points before, you get it after you've conquered the dragon. And going out and tackling those dragons are what will get you self-esteem and get you feeling good. Oh, okay. Number 3, and maybe this is the thing that changed my life more than anything else. Like, I owe so much to the person who was the source of this that I can't really put into words. But the third thing that I think has really changed my life in my perception of feeling like maybe I am good enough and all that I'm able to express myself properly and have great relationships with other people, that I no longer self-sabotage myself with girls, is because I learned to tell the truth. And a big shout out to, I think everyone knows where this is going, but Jordan Peterson, his rule, tell the truth or at least don't lie, is the most important chapter of any book I've ever read in my entire life. This one thing, and it's not like some choir boy bullshit that you just need to be like, ooh, you should tell the truth. Nah. This is like a fundamental framework for how to live your life and like a philosophy around what you can do. Because the amount of arrogance that I used to have, that I thought I could bend reality with my lies to manipulate it for what I'd want. Because, let's go down this conversation. I don't know about you, but sometimes, obviously when I was younger, someone would like ask you a question. And the way that I'd approach that is I'd initially think, what is it they want to hear? And then reverse engineer, what is it they want to hear and what is it I want out of this? Find them to and reverse engineer what I need to say to get that to happen, okay? And often that would require like either white lies or just manipulative behavior. And I was thinking with my own arrogance that I can bend reality. Like reality exists out there, and what we will do in our arrogance is try and bend that and claim it's not real, what I believe is real, and see how that plays out. Because what happens when we try and bend reality with our words, like a ruler bent in front of your face, we're bending it backwards and we think, oh shit, I got away with that. I managed to oversell myself in a job interview and then they gave me the job. Win. I think I should just do this all the time. Then what happens 3 months down the line when you're absolute dead miserable in a job because you probably weren't qualified for it and you probably weren't good enough to do it at the time, and that ruler snaps fucking back in your face? I have not seen one lie that I've told in the last 3 years not come back to haunt me. And this is something that Jordan Peterson quotes as well. And he did like clinical psychology for like 40 years with people. And the thing that terrifies him most in this world is this simple idea. He never saw a client get away with a lie even once. Not once. Not once did they ever get away with telling a lie here and it just paying off with no consequences. Maybe sometimes we don't see the consequences. I don't see the lie that I told in the job interview 3 months down the line when I'm miserable in my job. I'm just like, well, what's going on? This sucks. But every single one fails. And beginning to stop leaving yourself in a position where you're just tripping over previous lies you've told really helps build your self-esteem. Because you know what? It's real difficult to tell the truth in the moment. You often have to have the hard conversations to really tell the truth about how you feel. Funnily enough, builds your self-esteem. Because you watch yourself prioritize what you think and feel over what other people think and feel. Because that's why we lie. We lie to try and get validation from others, to try and get something from other people. Often it's because we're valuing their opinion of us over our own opinion of ourselves. And literally, I could spend 20 minutes with you on this of why it's so deadly important. If you made only one change in your life, do this. Sack off every single other thing, but start to be in that position that when you're acting in the world and someone asks you something, or when you're speaking out, telling the truth, like saying, I don't know. So being brave enough when someone asks you a question and being like, oh, I don't actually know the answer to that. And being clear about the elements of yourself, because once you start to tell the truth, you're no longer hiding these parts of you in the fog. Like, one of the reasons we don't feel good enough is because we've determined ourselves to be that by hiding. Maybe it's the fact that you've got these more feminine elements of you and you've decided they're not okay. So I'm not going to show them. I'm not going to tell the truth if someone says, do I like this kind of music? Am I this kind of person? I'm going to lie because I'd rather they like me and I think they want me to be Turbo Chad. And all that does is compound this belief that we're not good enough. And I did that for years and it led me to a miserable bloody cliff edge. Do not go down that path. That is not where you want to be. It makes you feel awful and hollow. Telling the truth is one of the biggest changes you can ever make in your life. And I guarantee, having faith that the best possible outcome, even if it feels like you don't get what you want in the moment, you get what you want, like, you'll get what you want in the end. Take it back to the example of the job. I don't think I should have gotten one of the jobs that I got. And had I told the truth more in the interview, then I'd have missed out on that job and I'd have been disappointed. And I'm like, you know what, fuck telling the truth. This sucks. I wanted that job. It paid good money. But what would have likely happened is I'd have found another job I was more well suited to. I'd have gone into that job and I'd have worked really hard and really well and got all this positive emotion out of the fact that I didn't suck every single day. I was miserable for the 9 months after I took that other job. I created 9 months of misery for myself because I was unwilling to tell the truth. That is just unacceptable, and it's not something I'm willing to commit to anymore and bury my self-esteem in it. And this hits us with the final one, and we're going more abstract with this, but I think it's also important because I think this is one of the ones that's most relevant to what I did now. If you're stuck in that place where you don't feel good enough, one of the things that you can do is be willing to walk into the abyss. That sounds freaking scary, and what does that mean? But what I've found, especially from myself and others, we're often so desperate to keep things just as they are, even though we're kind of miserable and it's not working. So say it's like a relationship that you're not really happy with, but you don't want to break up because then you'd be alone. And like, oh, I don't know how to get out of being alone. Or it's the job that makes you miserable, but you don't really want to quit it because unemployed sounds rough. We become so terrified of the abyss that we leave ourselves treading water instead. So picture this. I think far too many people spend their entire life treading water, trying to keep their mouth just afloat in the belief that if they were to go underwater for just 1 second, they die. Like if for one moment you're out of control, you're underwater, even for a split second, you die. So we're going to put all this effort into rapidly panting, trying to keep ourselves just at this moderately level of surviving to keep your mouth above water. Well, for some people, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes you need to be brave enough to go into the darkness under the sea, to be able to come out of it the other side. For me, the example of that was when I didn't really know if I'd made the right call I quit my job, which pushed me underwater a bit, and I'd pursued this career that was super alternative and not what I had any roadmap for how to do. And I'd hit this point where things were just not going well. Like I'd not really connected with anything I was doing. Like I was on Twitter and I hated that. And then I was starting to do the YouTube channel, but things hadn't taken off with that. And I was just really struggling. And I hit this point where I had the opportunity to just go back to finance. I could have just gone back. I could have gone there and just picked up my life where I left off. Or I had the opportunity to double down a bit more. I had a last little bit of savings that I was terrified to use because that meant that was all of my buffer. And I had the choice. Was I brave enough to put myself in a position where I felt really out of control, where I really felt like, oh, this is it. I need to go somewhere that I've not gone before. And I did. And it put me in this position where everything was so chaotic and everything was carnage. But I watched myself claw out of that dark pit back to an area where everything is going quite well. And watching myself do that process has given me more faith in my abilities than anything else I've ever done. Because it's all well and good going from medium to good. But if you want to go from abysmal to really great, you watch yourself do that, you gain some level of self-respect. I remember there was times when I was just like lay flat on a mattress. I had no friends in the city that I was in. Nothing was working out for me. My money was draining down and I was like, I have managed to set my life on fire. This is not good. I have really deeply fucked up and I didn't know what was going to happen next. And through what I referenced earlier of that deliberate action of fighting the dragons, I dragged myself out of the abyss. And the thing is, through doing that, I've developed more security around the idea of ever falling down again. Because that's the funny thing about confidence. It's not really in relation to knowing that everything is going to work out exactly how you wanted it to. It's not, I'm not confident because I have a certainty it's going to go well. Confidence actually comes from being fine if it doesn't go well and knowing it'll all be okay. It's like, I'm not confident because I know I'm going to get everything right. I'm confident now because I've seen it. If I ended up absolutely broke with no social connections, in a country where I don't speak the language, being miserable with no prospect, well, I got out of that before. So I'm not too afraid of it. I was willing to like sink under the water and realize that, oh, rather than just flapping around, I can hold my breath under here, pace it forward and come out up top again and go under and come out up top. I'm not there wasting all my energy, desperately clinging on to a position that I'm not even happy with. I know that's the scary idea. And I'm not like, yeah, just go quit your job and do all this random stuff. But if you're in a position that you're pretty miserable with, but the thing is, you're holding yourself back because it offers a tiny bit of security. One of the ways that you can escape this idea of not being good enough is just testing yourself out. See if you can go into those darker areas and see if you can make it truly work. Push yourself a little bit more out of your comfort zone. We don't gain confidence by working and doing our stuff within the castle walls. The knights, the people in the stories, it's never the adventure where they just stayed at home and things worked out okay. It was the ones that left the castle walls, went out into the dark woods, encountered a bunch of stuff that nearly bloody killed them, and then they came back victorious. And I know that sounds scary, but having a level of self-esteem is not something you get by default. It's something you earn. I think I heard you can either have an easy life or a good character. And I think that's what we all go through, that we almost want to be able to escape this like not good enough thing, but doing it like a potion where we just drink it and we're done. And that isn't really how this works. It requires us to set foot outside the castle walls, go on the adventure, look the abyss in the eye and see that if you stare into the darkness long enough, you eventually find the light. But most people will briefly look at the darkness and say that that's not for them, and they'll run back. And then they never get the bravery required to see themselves as an active agent in the world and have that level of self-respect, so they're not always haunted by these ideas of not being good enough. And if this calls out to you and you're really wanting to be that guy that is about to leave on his adventure and do these things, tell the truth, well, I can tell you that there is one emotion that will hold you back. And I consider it the most deadly, and it stops so many men in their tracks when they want to become something in the world. So if you want to do this, you want to get that self-esteem, start to see yourself as good enough, then I recommend you check out this video where I discuss the one emotion that needs to be conquered first, and that will allow you to be an active agent in the world and always see yourself as good enough.